Meet my new friend Alex. Alex is a world traveler and content creator who makes super cool videos wherever he goes. Although he lives quite nomadically, Alex ended up spending a long time in the Philippines, where he fell in love with Filipino culture. Definitely check out his channel, Living Abroad. Link in the description below. It was really nice to chat with Alex and find out what he appreciates about Filipino people, how he became a full-time traveler, the advantages of living in the Philippines, and lots more. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Good to meet you.
You as well, man.
You're in Bangkok.
Yeah, right now I'm here for the Songkran Festival, so I am not in Cebu right now. So I came here a couple weeks early just to get the whole vibe, and then I'll be here for that big festival, and then probably go back to the Philippines.
So, do you have a place that you base, that you have like a headquarters in, or are you always moving?
I'm usually always moving, but lately it's been Cebu in the Philippines because, people love watching those videos. I love interacting with people. The English is obviously the number one factor. There's a lot of foreigners there. I found Cebu City, for me personally, the perfect kind of like mix of everything I'm looking for. YouTube content, travel when it comes to small islands. I'm a city guy, so it's big enough for me to enjoy. So yeah, it's not bad.
That's how I found you, obviously, was through YouTube. I saw your videos where you do a bunch of different street interviews. I noticed that a lot of them were in the Philippines. Would you say that your channel is primarily Filipino content?
What happened was I never wanted to be a YouTuber or start a YouTube channel. It wasn't really my plan. I was an online English teacher, and during COVID, I went to Turkey because they were the only country accepting still, tourists and visitors. So while I was there, they had this rule where the locals could not go out. They were on curfew, but the tourists could. So I'd go to these beautiful historical places with me and like maybe a handful of people. You'll never see this place like that again in the future, I feel like. So I'm like, this is a great opportunity to start making some of these videos. So that's how it got started. And then a couple years ago, I went to the Philippines with only 3,000 subscribers. And then with that, it blew up because I think there's so much interest in the Philippines. The channel's kind of all over the place, but it's also very specific. It's hard to explain because I post like every third day. So I put a lot of work into the channel, but lately for the past couple months, it's been mainly street interviews.
My second beginner's Tagalog course is now available. I am so excited to share with you what I've learned after speaking Tagalog for nearly a decade in this second volume of my beginner's Tagalog course. I'm not interested in teaching you anything that you can't actually use in conversation with Filipinos. This course is all about helping you gain useful vocabulary and essential grammar points so that you can actually express yourself in Tagalog. I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed and intimidated by the idea of jumping into learning a new language. But trust me, you can do it, and I'm here to help you. Click the first link below to get started. Now, back to the video. What is the percentage of your followers that are Filipino?
We don't know if they're Filipino, but I can tell if they're watching from the Philippines. So that's also a little bit skewed because there are a lot of Americans in the Philippines, a lot of Canadians in the Philippines, a lot of foreigners basically, right? So I can see right now about 34 to 40% of my audience is from the Philippines.
Where are you from originally?
Originally, I'm from Afghanistan, but I migrated to Canada when I was a youngin', maybe 3 or 4 years old. So I located in Toronto. So that's where my home is right now. But I've been out of Canada for like 5 years now. So I left 2019, and I only go back twice now during that time. So I only go for family emergencies, or if I miss my family, or if there's something to do with my home in Canada. So yeah, I've been away for like 5 years living abroad.
So what sparked that choice to leave Canada and start traveling?
You know what it was, man? I went to Thailand in 2012, I believe, or 2014. And that was my first like solo trip by myself, no relationship, no responsibility, nothing. And, it was my first time in Thailand. And from the moment I got off the plane, I just knew this was the type of lifestyle I wanted to live. Just that drive to the hotel, seeing all the street food and seeing all the people, the nightlife, the whole culture got me. And I'm like, when I went to the beaches and the cost of living was incredible, like I would buy all this food and it would come to like $6 or $7. I'm like, how? I don't understand, So, and I knew I wanted to live that kind of lifestyle because like I'm not married, I don't have kids. My parents aren't like old that they need my help or anything. I was just basically going to work, doing the 9 to 5 job, looking at the walls and just dreaming about Thailand. So I'm like, I got to make this happen. So I got a job working as an online English teacher. I quit my job. I did that and I just essentially left the country, and I've been doing that since 2019.
And then how did you end up in the Philippines? Like your first trip there, how did that take place?
Honestly, by that point, I've been to a lot of the Southeast Asian countries. I had no idea what the Philippines was even about. I know growing up in Toronto, I saw a lot of Filipinos as like, just people living there. And I found them to be very polite, very nice. And a buddy of mine wanted to take like a guy's trip. And he's like, hey, let's go to Thailand. I'm like, I've been to Thailand a couple times. Let's try Philippines. There was no specific reason. But once we got there, I went to Palawan. I went to some of the touristy places. And I just fell in love with the people's kindness. And they're so sweet and they speak English, so you can have in-depth conversations a lot more than Thailand per se. So he went back to Canada because he has a regular job, and I was like, you know what, I'm staying here. And the fact that the Philippines allows you to continuously extend your visa up to 3 years as a tourist was like a big bonus for me, right? So I'm like, this is it. So I rented an apartment, and at that point, I was still working as an online English teacher. So I needed a stable place with internet connection. I don't know if that's when COVID happened, but I was there for like 9 months at one point. So a very long stretch of time. And that really basically planted my roots in Cebu and makes me keep coming back.
So your very first trip to the Philippines, you were there for 9 months.
Essentially, yeah. That's
Wow.
one way of looking at it. Yeah, I didn't even think about it. But initially, it started off with just 2 weeks. But when the 2 weeks was over and my buddy had to go back to his regular job, so I'm like, I don't got nowhere to be. Why not just continue living here? So that's how it happened.
I've heard that story from a few different people of going to the Philippines with a certain number in mind, like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and they end up staying a lot longer than that.
Also, I feel like it's a good first country to start if you've never been to Southeast Asia, right? Because of everything we just talked about. The friendliness of the people, you feel a bit of comfort. And it's really westernized as well when it comes to like the restaurants and just the pop culture and music and all that. So for me, it felt a little bit like home already. So I'm like, why not stay in a place that actually wants me? Like the government wants me in this country. The people are so welcoming, right? And one thing for me, I like talking to people, for example. So even at cafes, restaurants, at the parks, anybody that I found either attractive or just looks fun to talk to, I would just spark up conversations. And these conversations led to all kinds of networking and events and, meeting new friends and doing all kinds of things. And I feel like in the Philippines, no matter who you are in your home country, you kind of get like a fresh start and you can be whoever you want to be. No one really cares about your past. They don't judge you the same way.
Was there any culture shock at all when you first got there?
By that point, to be honest, not necessarily. No, because I've been to so many Southeast Asian countries. I've been to Cambodia, Thailand, as we mentioned, Vietnam. So the whole idea of like maybe the poverty aspect of it, and like I'm from Afghanistan, so I've seen that even as a kid. So for me, it was nothing new. The one thing that did surprise me a bit was how happy the people were, even if they were in the best of circumstances, right? So that was one thing that kind of like was a really eye opener for me. Just because somebody was living in a less developed area didn't necessarily make them a hateful person or a mean person or a rude person or a jealous person. I played basketball with the local kids, and even like the barangay captain would invite me to a birthday party. I'm not like Caucasian, for example. So this whole idea that the Filipinos only like white guys or white people, it's just a myth. It's not about that. And I'm not very tall. I don't stand out in any way that somebody would want to be with me, So even as a regular average looking person, they still accept you. They still want to share their beer, their cake, whatever they got with you. So it's a really cool culture.
I talked to another one of my friends who lives in Manila. He's been there 8 years. And he said that the way that Filipinos treat foreigners is better than they might treat another Filipino. I'm not sure if those were his exact words, but he basically said that there's some kind of preferential treatment to people that are from another country. Not necessarily white people, but just like foreigners in general. Has that been your experience as well?
I would say yes. I mean, it is what it is. And I don't want to sit here and lie to people about the way Filipinos treat themselves. For example, from being younger, they tease the morena people, the one that have darker skins, for example. I don't want to generalize the whole country, but it is true that they'll treat foreigners a bit different. And I think a lot of that comes from they want to show their hospitality. I feel like when a foreigner comes, they know you might be new, that you are perhaps a guest, or you obviously maybe not born in the Philippines. So they want to show you and go above and beyond and show their generosity, their hospitality, their kindness, and they're very proud people. So I think it comes from that as well, because they might think, oh, Filipino knows how we are. We don't got to pay any attention to them. So it's partly because of that and partly because of colonialism. I'm sure at some point and it's embedded in the roots and the history.
I'm assuming that the Philippines probably isn't as diverse as Canada, for example, where you see, hundreds of nationalities all over the place.
I can spot a foreigner a mile away, and that's the other reason makes my job easy, for example, in the Philippines trying to do interviews. For example, if I try to do my interviews, street interviews in Indonesia or in Thailand, the first question I'd have to ask, do you speak English? Before I could even start anything. Whereas in the Philippines, that's already a given. So I can be myself and go straight into whatever I want to do.
It's more approachable for an international audience.
Definitely. And I feel like Filipinos are approachable too as people, right? Like, for example, in the Philippines, a person in the park can be playing a guitar and you could just walk up to them, talk to them about their music, their guitar, how long they've been playing for. There's no barrier like it is in some other countries, right? I can never walk up to just anybody. I think in Canada, people are too busy. Canadians are nice, they say. But I think a lot of times it's like, we are, but to a certain degree, people still got a job, they got to go to work, they're always busy, they may not give you the time of the day, but I think the Philippines is different.
We're talking about the advantages of speaking English in the Philippines. Does that mean that not speaking the local language hasn't been a hindrance to you during your time in the Philippines?
Absolutely not. I don't speak a word of Bisaya or Tagalog. I mean, maybe one or two words I might pick up, but I just never needed to. Like I just feel like me being lazy and busy, it just does never occur to me to even like learn a proper sentence or two because everyone speaks English essentially. I don't think I came across a single person that didn't understand what I was saying. So when there's no necessity, usually the desire drops, just like anything else, right?
Like, yeah, the communication is definitely there. When two people have a language in common, there's always going to be communication. There is something about if you speak someone's first language, there can be a closer proximity, like culturally. You can connect to people in a different way. Do you feel like you're missing out on anything by only speaking English?
A little bit, I'll be honest, and I agree completely, right? So I think the fact that I know for sure that I'm going to be constantly traveling at this stage of my life, that's also been an excuse for me not to take up learning Tagalog or Bisaya, right? But in the Philippines, you can sense a connection with people when they speak their own language, right? Inside jokes or whatever, that sense of community gets more strengthened. If I had the choice, 100%, I would love to be able to speak one of the many dialects there, right? So if it was like a snap of the finger, I'll learn that language immediately.
Have you traveled around the Philippines or have you found Cebu to be like your place?
So mainly I stayed in Cebu, but I've also been to Palawan, I've been to San Carlos, Dumaguete, Manila, all throughout like Siquijor, Oslo, Malapascua. So I've been to some areas for sure, but not as much as I'd like to. I've been to Cagayan de Oro, I've been to Davao cities, I went to Mindanao area, but only like a week or so at each point. But I'd love to like spend a whole bunch of time just traveling if I can.
Out of all of those places, is Cebu your favorite?
Yeah, it is because firstly, it's got the international airport, so it's very easy for me to go in and out. It's got a Bureau of Immigration for my visa situations if I got to extend them. Also, it's because it's got the IT park, which is all the call centers. So I feel like in Cebu City, I'm almost like living on campus, right? So that vibe I really enjoy. And it's got like great internet connection because I know sometimes when you go to smaller islands, the internet connection is a bit weaker because they're not as developed yet. So me uploading YouTube videos becomes a challenge or whatever as well. And it's close enough to a whole bunch of smaller islands like I mentioned right now. Some of the like thresher sharks in Malapascua or the whale sharks in Oslo. Weekend getaways basically. So it's got everything that I need for sure.
So how long have you spent in the Philippines now in total?
In total, I'll say about 2.5 years if I combine, or maybe about 2 years if I combine all the months together.
Is the Philippines the country where you've spent the most time, like cumulatively?
Yeah, definitely, by far. I think the second place was Istanbul, Turkey, because of the lockdown, the COVID and all that. I spent about 8 months in Turkey. That's another amazing country, but for different reasons, yeah, for sure.
On your channel, Living Abroad, obviously you do a ton of different interviews, and you've done tons of them in the Philippines with foreigners that have come from all over the world. Do you notice a trend among foreigners in the Philippines? Something that they might have in common that brings them there or keeps them there?
Yeah, there's a couple of different groups of people I feel like in the Philippines. The first group I noticed is a lot of ex-military people that spent some time in the Philippines during the service, Americans specifically, or even British. In Clark, there's a U.S. base, or there was a U.S. base where a lot of people came through. And I think a lot of people want to relive that life they had in the Philippines during the military days. Now that they're retired, now that they have like some money, they just come here to relive that moment, that lifestyle. Then there's also the pension people that have already retired. They only get $2,000 or $3,000 a month. They want to go to a country where they can make their money stretch as far as they can. And the Philippines is excellent for cost of living if you're smart with your money. See, that's one thing about the Philippines I like. You can live as lavishly, as expensive as you want, just like you would in any Western country, or as cheap or as more affordable as you like. And then you have the people that are usually younger, that are like maybe a couple or a bunch of group of friends that come through and they go through all the most touristic places they see, for example, right? So they just check out all the different islands, they're here for a short amount of time, and then they take off. And then you have the fourth group that's just here to find a wife or a life partner.
Do you have a favorite Filipino food?
I would say I like sisig, anything like the noodles, pancit, canton, any variation of that. Lumpia is also delicious, but yeah, I'd say probably sisig.
I feel like that's a classic among Filipinos as well, the sisig. Everyone loves that.
It's so flavorful, and it's just a mixture of textures as well. I was a little, maybe not thrown off by like when I figured out what's in sisig. I'm like, ooh, okay. So it's got like a different parts of the face, right? It's like ears and tongues and all that. I'm like, it tastes good, so whatever.
The very first time I had it was like maybe 10 years ago, and I really didn't like it. I didn't like the texture. It was so crunchy, and it probably had something to do with the fact that like you said, I knew it was like ears, like fried ears and stuff, and I really didn't like it. And then I've had it later now, like, years later, and now I love it. So I don't know what changed for me, but I think a lot of times they also don't use the actual like ears to make it. Like sometimes it's just pork. Like it's just fried pork cut up.
I don't eat pork, so for me it was chicken sisig. I enjoyed it, but somebody mentioned, but what parts of the chicken did they use? And I'm like, I guess you're right. They have the same kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point though, because chickens don't have ears and they have very small faces. So
But eating beaks, I don't know what part of the chicken I ate.
What are they using? Toes and beaks. As a Canadian, what would you say the biggest differences are between Canada and the Philippines in terms of culture?
Well, it's difficult because Canadian culture, as you know, is so wide in range, right? I don't know. I can't even think of our national food except for poutine, right? So we don't really have something that's authentic Canadian and maybe maple syrup. But like when it comes to the people, it's hard to put my finger on it, to be honest. I think the biggest difference culturally might be the fact that there's a big sense of community in the Philippines, right? Where I think in Canada, we're very individualistic people, right? So we're always thinking about me, or my job, my work, my stress, my this, my that, right? The Philippines is more of like a community and a family. Like, so usually when they speak of anything, it's us or we. They talk about family a lot. Even like if you go on a date, you might see somebody asking, can I bring my sister? Can I bring my cousin? Can I bring my friend? Because they do everything together. And I think that sense of community is a lot more strong in the Philippines than it is in Canadian culture.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I haven't been to the Philippines, but I've noticed that with Filipino people here or even in other countries that I've been to where they seem a lot more collectivist, where Canadians are like, nah, I'm looking out for me. I'm just going to do my own thing, right? Obviously, Canadians still care about their family, but like anything outside of that, it seems kind of extra. Where like, for example, Colombia is where I've spent the most time outside of Canada, and everyone's included, like cousins and aunts and uncles, and a lot of people here don't even really talk to their cousins. Like they don't even know them. They're like, they might as well be strangers, right? Yeah, they know their names and that's it. And then with my Filipino friends here, I've noticed that as well, that when someone has a party at their house, everybody's invited.
Not only family, but whoever's in the community, whoever's in the neighborhood. They all come by, they stop by, they sing along. That I think is beautiful. It's wonderful. And I think living in the West, I kind of lost a little bit of that as well. You try to make plans with friends. Hey, how's next Thursday? You have to literally schedule people in, Filipino culture, if you say, hey, party tomorrow, they come no matter what.
Now, thinking like way ahead to your future, when you want to ultimately retire, would you like to retire in the Philippines? You want to come back to Canada? Is there another country that has your eye? Or
honestly, I never have thought of that, but I get that question asked often. I could see myself retiring in the Philippines. Like I mentioned, obviously I like it enough to keep coming back, but there's no definite plans as of right now. I think the thing that keeps me coming back to the Philippines is the people themselves. They're so warm and welcoming. Every time I come back to Cebu, I just feel like I'm at home. There's like a big smile on my face. I go to all my regular places. They say, hey, Sir Alex, you're back. I'm like, hey, what's up? You feel like you're welcome, and why not go somewhere that you are welcome?